With Hollywood's endless barrage of remakes and reboots, we thought they might be running out of ideas, so we're here to throw a few more ideas on their to-do list. And it's all happening right now on Listed. Let's face it, as much as we all love to complain about Hollywood's lack of creativity, the cogs of the machine will keep turning no matter what when there's money to be made, and that means reboots and sequels of beloved franchises will continue to show up on the silver screen. And we figure, if you can't beat them, join them. So today we're taking a look at 7 movies that should totally be rebooted, and in our oh-so-humble-Clevver-opinion, movies that actually deserve the reboot treatment. Let's kick this off with a title you're sure to already be familiar with, Fantastic Four. Yep, that one. There have been 3 large-scale attempts at bringing one of Marvel Comics' oldest and most famous teams together on the big screen. Back in 2005, 20th Century Fox attempted to kick a franchise off with a movie that co-starred Chris Evans and Jessica Alba, and it was about as boring as each character's power. 2007 saw the sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, attempting once again to win audiences over, but instead sealed the Four's coffin for almost a decade. Then, last year, Fox once again attempted to bring the famous family team to audiences with a dark and gritty reboot, and well, we'll let its 9% Rotten Tomatoes score speak for itself. So why try to reboot again? Well, for one, Fox has no choice but to reboot or make a sequel for the franchise because, according to their contract, they have to release a film with the property every few years, or else the rights revert back to Marvel Studios, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But the big reason to reboot this franchise is because the superhero world could use some family friendliness. Of course, the MCU fills in that gap somewhat, but the Four's major appeal is their sense of family, teamwork, and general camaraderie. This team doesn't need dark and somber tones. It's an invisible woman, a stretchy guy, a human rock, and a human flamethrower. It doesn't get much goofier than that, so why not inject some fun back into Fox's superhero films like Deadpool did, and just go for a solid adventure film that everyone can enjoy, not just the brooding Doctor Doom types. The Neverending Story. When Hollywood doesn't have a franchise to go to, they often turn to the book world to mine their stories, and we think, why not do both? The Neverending Story debuted in theaters in 1984 that was based on a popular book series of the same name and crushed at the box office. Audiences and critics fell in love with the fantasy elements, marvelous set pieces, and general approach to kids' material that wasn't all gumdrops and rainbows. The film had 2 sequels that didn't fare as well as the first, and the franchise eventually drifted into nothingness. Now that we're in a world full of Stranger Things, Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, and Ready Player One, it feels like audiences would gladly welcome back grittier versions of kids' movies that use fantasy and sci-fi to tell real emotional stories. Basically, it's the perfect time to strike with a movie about kids' existentialism while featuring a giant flying dog. Director Peter Jackson, who brought Middle-earth to life on film with his Lord of the Rings and Hobbit adaptations, has been rumored to be working on a remake for The Neverending Story, and we're hoping that will be the case because who else could bring an epic, never-ending story to the big screen than the guy who gave us 15 endings to Return of the King? Lord of the Flies. Speaking of existential kids' movies and books, did anyone ever read Lord of the Flies in school? If not, you missed out on a seriously gnarly story detailing what might happen if kids were to be lost and abandoned on a desert island without parental supervision. We're not talking about having ice cream for dinner problems. Lord of the Flies deals with the actual repercussions kids might face in that situation, such as lack of leaders, starvation, and the general philosophical debate of whether or not humans are inherently evil, driven by fear and hatred. So yeah, not exactly Peter Pan. The book, written in 1963 by William Golding, was adapted to film the same year it was published, and again in 1990. Both versions had generally mixed reviews from critics and audiences who complained that the films deviated from the original story, losing the overall message and tone. But as we said earlier, audiences these days are more receptive to hard-cut messages and philosophical debates filled with excessive violence amongst children. So why not? The Last Starfighter. Video games, aliens, and intergalactic war. That was the basic premise and selling point for 1984's The Last Starfighter. In the film, the main character, Alex, lives in a trailer park and uses his free time to play an arcade game called, you guessed it, The Last Starfighter. In the game, the player defends their frontier from an alien armada. But surprise, when Alex achieves the game's highest score ever, He finds out it wasn't a game at all. The arcade was a test for his abilities to legitimately defend his planet and others. He's then recruited by an alien and expected to help lead the forces of change. Described by many reviewers at the time as a Star Wars ripoff, albeit a good one, The Last Starfighter seems primed more than ever to make its return to cinemas as a fun, family hybrid of Star Wars, Star Trek, and Terminator. It could also be a reboot quill by typing the original film story to a new generation via Alex, who is still technically at war in space. The title may need work though. The new Last Starfighter? The last Starfighter? Buck Rogers. Picture this, a World War I veteran falls into a coma, then wakes up 500 years later in America's future where society has fallen into gang culture between various forest-dwelling civilizations after the nation is overrun by larger powers. The veteran decides to lead a revolution. Sounds kind of like Mad Max, right? Well, it's actually the story of Buck Rogers, who was invented way back in 1928 as a pulp comic book character. It's obvious how much influence Rogers has had on modern cinema and adventure films and characters, but Buck has only had one major film release from 1979 and a handful of TV serials, which seems crazy considering the impact that he's had in pop culture over the years. There are so many ways a reboot could handle the potential franchise, from pure comedy to a real serious space opera. With elements from sci-fi, fantasy, adventure, and beyond, the Buck Rogers world seems endless. We'd also be totally okay with the Duck Dodgers film instead. Eragon. Adapting young adult novels has been all the craze lately in Hollywood, from The Hunger Games to Maze Runner to Divergent to Ender's Game, and while some are hit and miss, the adaptation of the Eragon series feels the most off-target. Basically using the Star Wars story model set in a Middle-earth type world, Eragon was an exciting series for kids that hit all the major selling points of a dystopian world with fantasy, sci-fi elements, fun characters, and an exciting story. Unfortunately, that's not at all what the film ended up being. The movie was described as bland at best by critics and absolutely eviscerated by fans of the book series, who have been complaining ever since the film's 2006 release to get a redo. And it really feels like prime time to do it. There's a vacuum in Hollywood for young adult adaptations and huge current obsessions with fantasy thanks to Game of Thrones and many others, and this is a chance to bridge those gaps and also give fans a chance to have their voices heard and respect the source material. WarGames. Back in 1984, a technological thriller was released that preyed on audiences' Cold War fears while also satirizing America's nuclear war policies, and it was called WarGames. Starring Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, the film blended several genres from comedy to government thriller and enamored audiences with its technological insight, which was considered very new and exciting at the time. The story was basically that Matthew Broderick's hacker character finds a backdoor code into America's nuclear war computers and accidentally begins a war game simulation that is taken as a real-life emergency by the government and the AI computer running it. What follows is a game of cat and mouse, and Broderick's character attempts to shut down the program while trying to stay out of trouble with the entire US government. And while the dial-up modems and green text computers would certainly have to be updated, the general concept of the story remains as relevant as ever and is prime for a reboot. Rumors that the film is getting remade have been around for years now, and with no real updates beyond some proposals of making it a virtual reality experience, which we admit would be pretty cool, but we'd like to see a smart filmmaker's new take that would likely excite audiences and create interesting discussions. That's all we have for you on Listed today. Now, what do you guys think of our picks for movies that should be rebooted? Anything that you change? What movies or franchises would you add to the list? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. I'm Sinead DeFries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Clevver's Listed.